Well, hello, hello, hello again, and welcome back to another episode of the Summer Spotlight 2020. I am your host, Gayle Nicholson. Thank you so much for being with us today. As always, if you are watching on Facebook, please give us some likes, give us some hearts, give us a comment or two, and if we see them and can answer them on the show, we definitely will. If you're watching on YouTube, please subscribe. We are growing very quickly, and we would love to have you along for the ride. So today, I would like to introduce you to a lady that has really caught my eye in the field of work that she does. Um, she is a sexual abuse recovery coach and has enormous facility with helping people actually deal with that part of their life if they've been subjected to such, and some amazing results in the people that she's worked with. I particularly am one of those people that are the type of person that she would serve. So it's especially gratifying to me to be able to introduce her to you today. Please help me welcome Miss Rachel Grant, sexual abuse recovery coach at www.rachelgrantcoaching.com. Thank you so much for joining us today, Rachel. How are you?
Oh, Gail, I'm wonderful today. Thank you so much for having me. And hello, everyone. Nice to be here. Welcome, welcome. So glad you're tuning in or listening after the fact, but really looking forward to our conversation today.
It's such a pleasure to have you, Rachel. Let's dig right into it, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Tell me, not necessarily your whole life history, but at the very least,
Mm,
how you ended up focusing on sexual abuse recovery.
yeah. Well, I think like so many people who go into helping professions, it's often born out of our own experience. And certainly that's the case for me as well. When I was 10 years old, my grandfather began sexually abusing me. And this was a real shock, in addition to just the fact of abuse. But he had moved in with our family when I was 5, and for those years had really been such a companion and a friend and somebody who I looked forward to coming home to from school. And when the sexual abuse started, like I know so many of us do, I immediately, like, the world just flips on its head, right? Everything you thought you knew, my home stopped being a place that felt safe. This person continued to be somebody who was both loving and nurturing and also harming. And so there was that, pain and confusion of all of that. And what I absolutely know now, years and years later, is that when abuse starts, we immediately are trying to understand why. And so I was just inundated with all of those common feelings of like, I'm bad, I'm causing this, I must have done something. And so the abuse continued for some time until one day my mom just happened to catch him in the act. And in that moment, she snatched me away from him, and she and my dad immediately got him out of our home, which I'm very thankful for. And I always make a point of naming, to honor my parents, because I've been doing this work for 13 years now. And I've heard many, many stories where that's not the case, where parents ignore or dismiss or minimize or even protect the abuser. So while he was out of our home, ugh, my insides were still a mess. I was a mess. And my parents recognized I was a mess and tried to get me to go to counseling, but I was not having that. Oh, Gail, I was like, you want me to do what? You want me to talk to who about, huh?
And you
And
were like, how old then?
I was about 11 and a half.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I was really, really resistant. I would literally run away and hide in the woods. I grew up in Oklahoma, in the country, so they couldn't find me. Then I wouldn't have to go. And I really just wanted to pretend that everything was okay, right? I just wanted to be a normal little girl. Can we just get on with it? And that's what I did, really, all the way up until I was 19. Now, that doesn't mean my teen years were a walk in the park. I mean, I was certainly dealing with the impact of that trauma in ways in which I had a really hard time trusting. I was very confused about sex and relationship, and generally feeling very low self-esteem, bad, hard time with boundaries, all of those common outcomes. But when I was 19, I started college, and I met a boy, and within a couple of months of dating him, it was, kind of my second quote unquote serious relationship. I was just really clear I didn't know what I was doing. I was so reactive. I was so, clingy and like suspicious. And my attachment, I didn't understand attachment styles then, but I was like all anxious attachment and like, come to me, come to me, come to me. And by way of having, conversations with him, I did share about the sexual trauma, and he, really encouraged me to go to counseling. And so I did. But all along the way, I was starting to kind of heal, and I was in this relationship, but my track was I wanted to be a high school English teacher. That's where I was heading.
Okay.
We were actually talking about Robin Williams before we started our conversation today, and he was a huge influence in my life. When I saw Dead Poet Society, I was like,
Yeah.
that's what I'm going to be. Like, that's it. That I want to live that life. And so I'm tracking along in college with, that being my intention, and doing some healing work and starting to kind of conceptualize what had happened. But at the same time, the relationship that was in was also becoming abusive. And so I was now in this world of trying to heal past trauma while being traumatized. And life also took a turn because I started to hang out with high schoolers and realized I didn't like them at all. I was like, oh no. So I had this huge kind of life crisis of like, what am I gonna do? But I fell in love with, elementary age kids, and I was like, I like this is where I think I need to work. And so I did that for a while, and worked in St. Louis at a private elementary school and did curriculum development. And when I moved out to California with my then husband, I switched into nannying. Right. So still in the world of like child development and care, but I got the added bonus of naps. That was fabulous and fun.
I love it.
Yeah. But, and then I was still struggling though, right? This relationship was not good. It was just not good. And, so it was compounding the trauma. I was still unresolved about the past trauma. And, when he and I divorced in 2006, I, moved into my new apartment. Here I am kind of starting over in my life. And I remember sitting there in that apartment. It was completely empty. None of my stuff had arrived. All I had was a lamp and a sleeping bag. And I just felt overwhelmed with life and my future and complete terror about what was going to happen next.
Right.
And was I just going to keep going this way? And I remember this really strong internal voice, maybe an angel, depends on your beliefs, right? Like just this, or a universal calling, whatever you want to call it. But I just heard these words: Rachel, you have got to get your shit together, like right now. And I sat up
this
and
vision
I was
of your
like,
guide sitting back with a martini,
yes,
going,
exactly,
"Get it together, lady."
Exactly. And so, man, I just recognized that I had done a lot of great work to understand the trauma. I was very book smart about trauma. I knew all the lingo. I knew what was happening, but I didn't know what to do about it. I didn't feel like things were really shifting. And the guides and mentors that I was in contact with at that time were really laying it on like, this is a life sentence. You're going to have to just deal with it. And that just didn't feel right. And so, Gayle, I really just became obsessed in that moment. Like, how do I actually heal from sexual trauma? So I began to read everything I possibly could, even more than I already had. I did my master's in counseling psychology. I began to study neuroscience. And, and my little bitties, my surrogate babies, they're growing up. So I'm starting to notice like I'm going to have to make a transition again. And so that's really what compelled me and moved me forward into starting my business, developing the Beyond Surviving program, after really using myself as a guinea pig for a couple of years, and a few brave women who were willing to try it out too, like what I was developing, what I was coming up with. And and so now I work with men and women all over the country, all over the world, who are at that place where like enough is enough. I am sick and tired of feeling broken, feeling unfixable, feeling like I'm going around the mountain and going around the mountain, and really are ready to look at what do we actually need to do in order to heal and move on with our lives.
I absolutely love it, and kudos to you. That's freaking amazing. I absolutely love the fact that you have worked on yourself as a guinea pig and helped other people and are willing to take the courage to step out there and help the
Mm.
world at large. I absolutely love that. As you were talking, there were so many times when I really wanted to go, me too, me too, me
Yeah.
too, kind of thing.
Yeah.
You know, the stories aren't, they're all unique, but they're not that much different, really.
Yeah.
Um, and I wanted to point out the fact that when I was little, I wanted to be a teacher too, but I went to Detroit public schools and I went, oh, hell
Oh
no.
man. Yeah.
No. But that drive to teach,
Mm-hmm.
I find, is present in a lot of people who end up
Mm.
where you're at, where I'm at, trying to help people that have gone through the trauma that we've gone through.
Yeah.
And I find it very amazing how many people who have suffered childhood sexual abuse
Mm-hmm.
become teachers or
Yeah.
nurses or counselors or some way put themselves in a position where they are legally bound. If they find
Mm-hmm.
evidence of a child being abused, they must report it,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
So,
Yeah.
there's, it's just amazing to me how many, people do that. I know
Mm-hmm.
quite a few of them
Yeah.
that
Me too.
literally structure their life so that they can't be one that
Mm-hmm.
sees what's going on and turns away,
Yeah.
you know? So,
There's something that David Kessler says. He is an author and works really in the world of grief. But in a recent interview, he was talking about, the uh, idea that our trauma, our pain, our losses is a gift. There are people out there who frame it that way. He says, no, none of the things that happen to us are a gift. The gift is what we make of it. And I think that's really what so many of us who have experienced harm and trauma want to do. We don't want this thing to just be something that derails our lives and runs our life. But when we understand it and contextualize it, and when we feel, that we've moved forward from it and we have something to offer about that, we want to pass it on to other people. And then that helps us in creating meaning. And that's really where it's the gift of meaning that we get to create from
yeah,
the things that have harmed us. And not everyone is required to go out and do that. We
right.
can, but there are ways that we can use our experiences in just our day to day to be everyday superheroes, right? I think so many of us, because of trauma, I often talk about like the superpowers of trauma,
Mm-hmm.
one of them being highly attuned. And if that's in balance, it can be a real superpower. If it's out of balance, you're hypervigilant, you're high anxiety, you're overreactive. But if you can bring it into balance, then you have a level of awareness that other people around you might not. And you can catch things and you can notice things, you can intuit things. And then that can be used to be really supportive and compassionate and aware and all those sorts of things. So, yeah.
Yep, agreed. 100% agreed. Now, since you do have your education in clinical, like psychological counseling stuff,
Mm-hmm.
right? I want to know specifically what you know about why does trauma have an impact on us?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, man, as I was doing my master's in counseling psychology, I first of all became very aware that I didn't want to go into therapy, and that's why I'm a coach, not a therapist, because I wanted to be able to work with trauma in a very through a different lens that coaching would afford me that therapy wouldn't. And one of the things that happened as I was doing my master's is I read Dan Siegel's book, The Developing Mind. And in this book, he's talking about how, like, the relationship of trauma, how trauma is relational, and also how the brain works relationally, and how the brain and the nervous system is impacted by trauma. And in that moment, Gail, I began to understand that what had occurred to me was an injury. And my brain had been injured. My nervous system had been injured, just as if I had fallen down and like scraped my knee.
Mm-hmm.
And I was approaching trying to heal from this lens of like, it's just me. Like I'm messed up. Like I've got to figure out, I've got to, create the entire process that's perfect just for me. But what I realized was like, wait a second. If I fall and I scrape my knee, I know exactly what to do, right? Wash it, clean it out, put a Band-Aid on, done. So what if there is a way to treat the injury of trauma similarly? and to understand the way in which the brain becomes wired, how the fight, flight, freeze system becomes overactive. That's the limbic part of the brain with like the amygdala, and how we can use that understanding of how the brain is impacted and injured by trauma um, to heal. Yeah, did that answer your question?
I
There
think
might be
so.
more to say about that, but
I think so, actually.
I
No,
mean,
that's probably the best description that I've heard, especially involving like the neuroscience and the fact,
mm,
and I 100% agree with you
mm,
that the trauma itself, whether it come through a sexual abuse situation or your house burned down, right?
yeah,
It's an injury,
yep,
right? It's
yep,
not the end of the world. It's like if you've got a scraped knee, you're absolutely right, and it can be addressed. It can be
mm-hmm,
healed. And
yeah,
like you just used in your example about the scraped knee, right? You wash it out. You clear out what doesn't belong,
mm-hmm.
what's not going to
Yes,
facilitate
come on,
healing,
Gail.
right?
Yes,
And
yes,
then you put a band-aid over it. Well, the band-aid's not going to stay there forever.
right.
It's only to protect the tender tissue until it's
Mm-hmm.
ready, to face
Yeah,
the world again.
that's
So
right.
that band-aid is a temporary thing. It's not a forever thing. It's,
Yeah.
kind of thing.
Yeah, that's something I often say to my clients. Like, our ultimate objective in the Beyond Surviving program is that you can look at these experiences, see them for what they were, notice the scar or the wounding, but not be impacted. Just like if you look at a scar, on your body, you don't re-experience, all of the pain. It doesn't bring it all up. You don't spend hours then revisiting it and rethinking it and
Mm-hmm.
ruminating on it. And so we have to create some distance and space, and that's ultimately what Beyond Surviving is really about. It's a model that is intentional about helping get complete people get complete about the past. I really don't think we're supposed to spend our lives in recovery,
I
you know
agree with you. Now, I
yeah,
want you to define that for me. What does it
yeah,
mean to actually be complete about something? Now, I get this as a distinction. I think you do too. But
yeah,
most of our viewers won't know what that distinction is. Can you explain
yeah.
it for them?
Okay, cool. So when we think about recovery, recovery is a period of in our journey where we're really focusing and putting a lot of our time, attention, and money into healing. And so we're digging in and we're moving things around and we're processing and we're bringing light to things and we're contextualizing and we're working to integrate these experiences, while also in Beyond Surviving at that stage developing skills and strategies and tools that help us live a dynamic, empowered, grounded life where we can stay in our adult self more often than not. And so when I think about completeness around the past trauma, it means that we have a relationship to that trauma in which it is integrated. I sometimes describe it like it's this thread that is a part of the tapestry of our life, but is not like the thread. When you're in recovery, it is like the spotlight is on it, and it needs to be that way for a while so you can heal. But if we stay there and everything is always about the past, always about the trauma, always coming back into a place of activation and triggering, then we're still really tied into the past. So for me, what complete sounds like is when somebody has the capacity to talk about that experience in the same exact way they talk about anything else in their life. So, for example, I grew up in Oklahoma. I love peanut butter. I love to dance. I was sexually abused. I have red hair and I love country music, right? Like, it's all the same tenor, it's all the same
Yeah, you
tone.
can tell in the timbre of the voice whether there's a hook there or not, and there's no
Yeah,
hook with the list that you just gave. Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
awesome, awesome stuff. So now, here's a question that I go around and around with myself a
Mm-hmm.
lot. Is actual healing really possible? I mean, we
Mm-hmm.
talked about this idea of, a wound and a scar, and, when you're really healing with like a physical wound, you can look at that scar and you don't feel the pain anymore.
Yeah,
But that scar is always going to be there.
sure.
Where do
Yeah.
you know that the scar is good, you know, and it never goes back to what it was before the trauma, right?
Correct.
You're always
Yeah.
going to have that scar. You're
Yeah.
always going to have the memory,
Yeah.
but the pain isn't there anymore, right?
Yeah, right. And so one of the biggest impacts of trauma is that we end up in a state of dysregulation. So our system is not balanced. And therefore, we are easily triggered.
Mm-hmm.
We can have really heightened trauma symptoms like depression, suicidality, anxiety, withdrawal, isolation. And that it's like, if you think about it like a scale, like everything's just really tipped over in that direction where these symptoms are frequent,
Mm-hmm.
high intensity, long duration.
Mm-hmm.
And so, in the process of healing, we're bringing things into balance. And in that process, some things just absolutely go away. They're just gone. Like it's not a thing anymore. It's done. And then the other piece of the puzzle is when your system does get activated, having a really high bounce back. So that means that you have the capacity in the moment of activation or very quickly after to do what you need to do in order to settle things down and to come back in to regulation. And so the idea here is that, triggers and traumas and the way that the brain is wired, the brain has billions of neurons. And so there are billions of associations.
Mm-hmm.
And so sometimes we're very clear about what triggers us, what sets us off. And then, we can be trucking along in our day and something happened and we no idea like what just kind of we bumped up against.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's that attunement, it's that awareness. And I always say to my clients, there are two things that we're after here: decreasing how often you become activated by getting your system regulated. So you're not kind of this live wire. Like in my life, when I was the most dysregulated, it was like I'd walk out the door, I'd be like, triggered, 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 triggered. Just like bumping around like I'm like a pinball machine, like boom, 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 boom. And I had no time to catch my breath. And so I was just white knuckling it through my life because the only thing I could do was just try to get through the damn day, right?
Right.
But when we're regulated, we can walk out into the world and there's ease and we can move about and we're not constantly triggered like that. And again, if we do bump into something and get that, then we can decrease how long we stay stuck there. And so when people talk about like, what do I mean when I say healed? That's what I mean.
Mm-hmm.
That you're not constantly thinking about trauma. You're not constantly thinking about the past. But if something shows up, you know how to handle it.
Right. I love that. I absolutely love that. Sometimes I use the analogy with my clients that you're unhealed, you're walking around the world like Velcro, right?
Ooh, yeah.
And
Yeah.
your hook sides are out. So everything you come up against, are you going to get hooked?
Mm-hmm.
You're going to get hooked and you're going to be, stuck, dragged back in place. Or healed, the other side of the Velcro is out. And whenever you bump up against something, there's a little bit of cushion. You kind of bounce off.
Oh, I love that, Gayle. I'm stealing it.
Okay, you can have it. So,
no, it's exactly right. Yeah.
So I know that there's. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Before we
well,
get
just
into
a final thought on that is just that. So then, what is present in your life then also begins to evolve and change, right? Your capacity to set boundaries, your capacity to stand up for yourself, your willingness to put yourself first, just your internal dialogues about yourself totally change, your capacity for healthy relationship. So healed is also, what are you creating? What are you experiencing in your life? What is just your day to day kind of
what
look
are the
like?
circumstances that get to show up in your space? Yeah.
Yeah. And sometimes I remember a moment in my life, maybe, oh gosh, maybe 3 or 4 years, when after I'd really done this really deep, really clearing work, and I was sitting on my couch and I was like, oh my gosh, my life is really boring right now. And I was so excited. I was so excited. I was like, there's no drama. There's no like, I'm gonna kill myself reactive, like none of that stuff happening, none of just like the overreactivity or the anxiety or all of that. Like life just got kind of quiet. And that can be hard. Like it actually was a period of adjustment. I had to teach my system to be okay with not being in chaos, because I'd been in that chaos for so long. It felt normal, it felt safe, it felt comfortable.
Yeah.
But
There's
when
almost an emptiness that comes with the
yeah,
lack of,
the
like
quiet.
what's missing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right, right. And so it's like cultivating a new normal and a new relationship with just being at peace.
Hmm.
Yeah.
That's phenomenal stuff. Awesome. Now, I know that there are a lot of people walking around the world right now going, oh, yeah, I know there's a problem, right? And probably following that up with, but I don't know if I'm ready to go through what it takes
Mm-hmm.
to shift, to heal.
Mm-hmm.
I can't even think about it without crying. How am I going to talk about it? That type of thing, right?
Yeah.
So, how does someone in that space go about starting the process of healing, even if they aren't ready necessarily to reach out and both feet
Yeah.
in and whatever goes, we're doing this, but to at least bridge the gap between it's always going to be this way and hope is
Mm,
possible.
something's possible. Well, that's really where hope comes in,
Mm-hmm.
and tapping into hope. And so, you know, I think beginning to passively interact with things like the Beyond Surviving podcast, listening to things like this, right? Listening to radio shows or reading books where you're not necessarily doing any healing work. You're not necessarily trying to focus in on your own experience necessarily, though you will be kind of cognitively bringing it forward, but you're not necessarily demanding of yourself that you do anything about it. So you give yourself permission to get curious and to explore without any pressure to shift or change. And I think through that, eventually you will get to a place of acknowledgement, like, yep, this is what's going on for me. I need to get some support. And that little moment of acknowledgement is the bridge where you come out of that denial place and into the place of survivor. That stage of work where you're beginning to, okay, I'm going to try to talk about this. Okay, I'm going to try to, voice what I experienced or where I'm struggling. So then finding places like the Healing from Sexual Abuse Facebook group that I run, or the monthly Adult Survivors of Child Abuse virtual group that I run. Both of those are free, and the group is donation based. So you can start to kind of dip your toe. Therapy is also a great place to go at that stage because you can just kind of land on the couch and spew out whatever needs to be spewed out,
Mm-hmm.
you know. And then with time, my main thing that I'm constantly kind of working with and trying to help people navigate is don't get stuck at the survivor stage,
Right,
right?
right.
We don't want to stop there. There's something beyond that, which is where we start to get into the application of strategy and tools and shifting of behavior and healing of mindset, healing of the brain, healing of the nervous system. And so people usually hit up against something in their life that instigates that moment of like, okay, I've done enough of it, again, getting book smart about
Mm-hmm.
trauma. And now I need to get a little street smart about trauma. Like, how do I actually walk and talk in the world and navigate that powerfully?
Excellent, excellent. As you were talking about that, I recalled my daughter who was in a car accident recently, and her leg broke, and
Oh,
she had to have surgery. She was in the hospital for a couple of days. She had to have surgery to put a steel rod in her leg. So this process of healing from something like that really is no different than the process of healing
yeah.
from sexual trauma.
Yeah.
You've had a huge injury, right? You need some care. So you may your body's going to heal, but you're also going to need facilitation from the
Mm-hmm.
outside to help strengthen that.
Yeah.
As you're, and then there's a process of learning, how to integrate using crutches or a walker of some sort while you're still in pain and tender. And then eventually the walker goes away, the crutches go away, and you start actually walking on your own feet again.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, it's still a little tender, it's
Yeah.
still a
A little
little
wobbly.
painful at times. You could limp a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then as you keep walking, though,
Yeah.
it strengthens. Now,
Yeah.
the break is never going to go away. The steel rod in your leg is probably going to be there for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
But you can function
Ooh.
fabulously
Yeah, this
in a
reminds
little
me of
while.
a moment in my own healing where I was really at my wit's end. I felt really broken. I felt like every bone in my body was broken, right? Like nothing is working, everything's a mess. And all I want, and I remember sitting in therapy saying, all I want is just to feel normal. Like, can I ever, will I ever? And this particular therapist said, no.
You
And
got
I
the
remember,
honesty.
I remember that moment, Gail, basically being like, you're fired. So I didn't know what the right answer was, but I knew that was the wrong answer. And and when I began reading Dan Siegel's work and again framing it as an injury, I was like, wow, okay, so like yes, when somebody breaks their leg, we don't say to them, "Oh, so sorry, you're just gonna have to live with that for the rest of your life."
Yeah.
You know? So why would we do that with trauma? Mental, emotional trauma. It's a
Mm-hmm.
different kind of break, but it's a break nonetheless. So we can bandage it, all of this that we've been saying,
Mm-hmm.
and move forward. And yeah, things are wobbly for a while before you catch your stride, but
Mm-hmm.
eventually you do.
Yeah.
And that's really the message, and that's really what I want everyone to connect into, because that's where the hope is.
Right.
Again, that's what we have to have, hope in order to inspire action. Without hope, we're on Netflix all day. Like nothing's gonna change. Why bother? To hell with it.
Right.
But as soon as we catch a little bit of hope, then we start to get curious. Maybe, what
Mm-hmm.
if?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then we can start to take little action. And that's absolutely the reason why the Beyond Surviving program is a curriculum. It's also because I was a teacher and that's the way my brain works, right?
Right.
Scaffolding learning. We teach things in a very particular order in education because if you try to teach, it's like math. If you try to do the things that are outside of the parentheses before the inside, you get the wrong answer. And
And
so I
if you
just got
skip the whole
really
first semester of algebra, don't
right.
expect to go to algebra 2 and know what the hell's going on.
No, not going to work. Yeah. And so that's really what I like in my, because this is all I focus on. That was the other thing. Like I didn't want to do therapy because I didn't want to be a generalist. And some therapists, focus very specifically, but for the most part, you're kind of dealing with lots of different things.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew that the one thing I wanted to really be working on, the thing that pissed me off, the problem that I wanted to solve was people really losing their lives essentially due to trauma. And so in the course of developing this program, I've just really paid close attention to what do we need to do when in order to maximize healing and minimize re-traumatization.
Well, that leads us beautifully into what you've offered our viewers today.
Mm.
So, you want to tell us a little bit about that awesome checklist that you're offering?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've talked about it a little bit here,
Mm-hmm.
some of those stages. And so um, one of the things that I think is so very helpful is to know where you are in the journey. What stage of healing are you in? And therefore, what are the goals and intentions, like things that you should be focusing on, and the things that you can set aside, like not ready yet, not time yet, and the kinds of support that align with where you are in that journey. So when you go to rachelgrantcoaching.com/checklist, you'll be able to download the 3 stages of recovery checklist and read through that, do a little bit of, assessment work and get clarity and see some really great resources there that you can take advantage of. And I will say, I lay it out in this beautiful linear way because that's how our brain works. But what's really so is that you can be in the victim stage, like in that place of denial. I don't want to look at it. I don't want to deal with it in one area of your life. And you can be in the beyond survivor stage in another area. Like you've really got it. You're clear. You have skills and tools. But people will generally land dominantly in one or the other place. And so that's going to really support you. So yeah, pop on over there, check it out, and use that list to get more clarity about where you are in your own journey.
That's phenomenal. I highly encourage all of our viewers, definitely go check out the checklist, take an inventory of where you're at, and if you need help, please, if Rachel Grant is a fit for you, reach out to her and ask for help. I mean, there's no reason to continue suffering alone. There are people that have walked the path and can guide you out of the forest.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, do you have any final thoughts for our audience today, Rachel?
Wow. Well, I just want to say thank you to everybody for tuning in and listening, and for the work that you are doing by being here and listening. And again, just really want to encourage you to keep knowing that you're not too broken, you're not unfixable. There are so many things that we can do to heal and to move on with our lives. And if there's anything I can do to be a support and resource to you in that, I'm totally down for it. So reach out, let me know, connect with me at the website or coach@rachelgrantcoaching.com.
Fantastic. Rachel, thank you so very much, not just
Mm,
for being here and spending your time with me today, but for the work that you're doing in the world. Unfortunately, it is excruciatingly needed, and there aren't enough people doing the healing work or leading in the healing of
mm,
it like you. So thank you for showing up. Thank you for doing what you
thank
do
you.
and bringing what you bring to the world. You're
Thank you,
amazing.
Gail. Thank you.
Awesome. All right, Facebook, have a fantastic, fantastic weekend. It is Thursday. Tomorrow is my birthday. I'm taking the day
Happy
off. I'm going away for the weekend. So
birthday!
try not to burn the place down while I'm gone, okay? Love you all. Take
Be
care.
well.
When you open yourself up to actual energy work, makes that recovery progress so much faster. That recovery is possible. You do not have to live as a victim until your last days. You have unbelievable strength, and I know that because you're still here. Do you want to create something completely unrecognizable with your life? I can show you how.